name is Dawn Graham. I graduated from Master Gardeners in 2023, so this is my first presentation ever, so I'm going to apologize in advance if my voice gets shaky or if I stand up here searching for words. So you all are my guinea pigs, I guess. Thank you.
Is that better or is that worse?
Not for my recording.
I got into ponds, I'm no expert by any means, because I wanted to heat up my greenhouse, and I was reading that water will help heat up a greenhouse. So I started with a 50-gallon pond, moved up to a 300-gallon pond, and it just evolved. So now here I'm starting with a 125-gallon pond. There we go.
You'll find it grows.
Thank you, yeah. And another benefit of having a pond or a water gardens mainly are for plants, but you can put fish in them, is I wanted to use the water for my plants. There's a lot of potassium, the NPK, you know, that's in the fertilizer, so I just got it naturally from the pond. Today we're going to discuss briefly about design, planning, constructing, equipment, filling, planting, and stocking your pond. And here my voice is getting shaky.
You're doing great.
Okay. Designing and planning. What do you want? How big of a pond do you want? Do you have the space for a pond? Do you want fish? Do you just want plants? There's all different types of ponds. There's preformed ponds. There's the ones that you dig in the ground with plastic. The one up the top there, the preformed, and then the plastic down there. Do you want to talk a little about digging with the plastic?
Sure. So,
Hand mic.
I did want a little fun. So yeah, there's really two places you start. Is the pond going to go up from the ground, or are you going to bury it into the ground? If you're going to bury it into the ground, then you can use either the liner and dig a hole. I'll warn you, as I'm sure all of you know, digging in West Texas is lots of fun. You need to dig deeper than you want your pond, because you're going to fill it back up with substrate underneath. So particularly if you're using even if you're using the preformed liners, your biggest challenge is making sure a rock doesn't punch a hole a year from now through it, because pulling it back out and fixing it is not a fun process. If you're digging a hole to use the plastic liner, I recommend lining the inside of it with cinder block, so that as time goes by, the erosion doesn't carry the dirt, and your pond keeps getting shallower and shallower as everything gets wider, but it gets shallower as everything fills in underneath. If you go up, you can't use either of these. You could use the liner if you built like a wall out of cinder blocks. I used 4x4s. You'll see a picture of some of my above ground pond later. But you can't use those preformed liners above ground, and you shouldn't use those preformed. But cattle troughs and cattle watering containers are awesome. And anything that's basically HDPE plastic, I know plastic's a bad word, but it doesn't leach anything into the water, and so that makes it a good container. So my first above ground pond was just a 300-gallon cattle trough watering container. Yeah. Do you want to talk about layout?
I'm a digging. I've never done a dug-in pond.
Okay.
I've always been
so again, when you're talking about digging for a pond, you want to have a plan before you start digging. Probably that's a generally good rule in life. But a lot of ponds, you want a shallower area if you're going to have plants and aquatics, lily pads and stuff, water lilies. Sorry, and then a deeper area if you're going to have fish. Fish need a little bit of depth to get down to, because if you keep your pond too shallow, they'll have oxygenation problems. So you need to give them a deeper section of water for them to hide from. So a lot of times you'll build like a shelf, and then you'll have a drop off and go down. If you look at a lot of the bigger preformed liners, they're built that way. They have little shelf areas designed to put in your plants, and then a deeper section if you have fish, or even your plants. We'll move our plants to the deeper section during the winter. So if you're digging, you need to make sure that you leave enough margin in your liner. So if you dig a 5-foot hole, you need to make sure you have enough liner to go down, across the 5 feet, back up, and you want at least 9 inches on either side. I recommend a foot. As you come up, because you're going to end up covering that with rocks, you want to make sure that you keep water from getting underneath your pond. You can have a 200-gallon pond and a good rainstorm, if the water can get right under it, it'll just float it up like a boat. And then you spend a lot of time trying to get it back into the ground. So make sure you have enough coverage. I don't think for this we're going to go into skimmers, but we will go into waterfalls. So the delivery of water into the pond is fairly simple, and we'll talk about that later. It's not really relevant to digging. Putting a skimmer in allows you to have a bigger filtration system. That's usually only on ponds that are 300 plus gallons. I have a 800-gallon pond. I don't have a skimmer in it. You use a skimmer basically if you're going to have your pumping system outside of your pond, as opposed to like a submersible pump that just, like a fish tank lives inside the pond. I probably should have studied the slides before I started talking. Definitely, like I said, as you put the liner down, make sure you weight it down with rocks around the perimeter. You can get fairly decorative with it, but it's real important because as the natural erosion occurs, like the pond's going to settle just like anything else, and particularly because you just put 300 gallons of water in it, it's very heavy. So as it pulls down, it's going to pull that liner in a little bit. So just when you first do it, I would leave way more excess than you think and trim it up 6 months down the road after it's settled into the ground and it's sure that it's not going to move anymore. You can't ever make it bigger, but you can certainly make it smaller down the line. And you can bury it. You just put rocks, stones around it.
Sorry,
Hang on.
newbie.
I was gonna
One more
actually
slide.
say, I know, the size of the pond number, I was gonna say.
Oh, yeah, so there's a pretty good formula. That formula only works on a rectangular pond. You can get really creative with some geometry if you have a kidney-shaped pond, but the liner comes in basically pre-built sizes, so the best scoop is to roll it all out before you dig a single shovelful. Figure out where it's going to sit, and then try to figure out what your shape is going to be without that. The biggest advantage of digging your own pond is you can have whatever shape you want. You can fit it wherever you're going to go. The preformed pond liners are much easier, but you're limited. You're going to have a pond that looks like everybody else's pond. I think that's all I got. Okay. I'm going to hand it back over.
See if it,
Thank you, Ken.
I may have like logged, try to advance it now. There you go.
All right. Thank you, Ken. Pond equipment. One of the things you have to decide is if you do a water garden or a pond, are you going to filter it? You can have still water, but then if you have still water, you have the risk of mosquitoes. So you would have to actually treat your water to eliminate those mosquitoes. If you do choose to put in a pump, you want to make sure that the pump will cycle half the amount of the water in your pond every hour. And you also want to make sure that the lift on the pump, if you're going to put in a waterfall, is going to accommodate that waterfall. Let's see. Types of filters, there's mechanical, there's biological, and there's all-in-one, which would include a clarifier or a sterilizer. The biological filters are beneficial bacteria that form inside your filter or even on the pond liners. Over here I have a DIY built filter which has both mechanical and biological examples there. You're more than welcome to look at it on break. Let's see. Filling your pond. Obviously, you're going to fill it with water and let it sit. A pond has to cycle for at least 4 weeks in order for that bacteria to build up in that pond if you're going to add fish. If you're not adding fish, you don't need to worry about it. But you want to wait for that bacteria to build up so that the fish will not die. Let me check my notes. And when you add your fish, you want to remember for every 1 inch of fish, you need 1 to 2 gallons of water. You do not want to overstock your ponds or water gardens because then you're going to have a whole bunch of problems thereafter.
So 1 inch per
1
fish?
inch of fish equals 1 to 2 gallons of water. So when you're building your pond and you're going to have koi get how big? So
18 inches.
for every 1 inch of that fish, you need 1 to 2 gallons. So keep that in mind. Planting your pond. You should plant 40 to 60% of the water's volume with plants. This is going to provide shelter for your fish, shade for your fish, food for your fish. The pollinators will come, adds color, and it also produces oxygen and it removes carbon dioxide from your water. And if you build it, they will come. I put my pond in April, and within a month I had a snake, I had toads, I had damselflies, dragonflies, birds, rabbits, and I don't know what came around at night. I don't have a... Various different plants you can put in. I have lotus, I have a canna lily. I know you have a few plants.
I don't have anything. She's the
Oh,
plant
she
person.
needs the
We just
plant
have the
person.
water lily.
Okay, and if you're doing
I'm sorry, I missed that. You said it needed to be 60% plants?
40 to 60% plants, yeah.
40 to 60%.
Various different plants. You can have plants that are in the bottom and grow up through the water, or floating plants. Duckweed is a nice plant to have if you have koi or shoebunkins or even comets. They love to eat it. They'll eat that. And also if you have fish, they will eat your plants, so you need to protect your plants. Oh yeah, the laws. There are some plants that are illegal to have in our ponds because if they get into our local water systems, they're very invasive. Water hyacinths are one that comes to mind. Water lettuce is another one that comes to mind. You do not want it. You can buy them. Nobody. But if you need to get rid of them, compost them. Do not put them in the local water supply. You don't want to put your fish in the local water supply either. Various different plants. The water canna is neat. I have one of those. It's really neat. And when you're stocking your pond, like I said, you want to wait for it to cycle, and you don't want to add 20 fish all at one time. Do 3 or 4 at a time, see how they do, and then add as you go further. And again, keep in mind, you do not want to overstock. Choosing your fish, depending on the size of your pond, will determine the type of fish you're going to have. Now the koi get about 18 inches. Shoebunkins, I think they're about 9 inches. Comets about 9 inches. Goldfish a little smaller. So you want to research and see which fish are compatible with each other. You don't want your fish eating the other fish, but do keep in mind bigger fish will eat smaller fish. The only fish I have in my pond are the gambusia fish, which is a mosquito fish. So they eat the mosquito larvae. I don't even feed my fish.
Do you include the mosquito fish in your little fish count for the water? Or do they count?
They breed so frequently. Gambusia fish lifespan is 1 year. They will have babies about 20 to 40 every 4 to 6 weeks. So I don't worry about the overstocking on those because within a year, quite a few of them are going to die anyway.
Don, are there local places to get fish for ponds, or do you have to order them and have them shipped in?
The Gambusia I bought locally. Can I say who I bought them from?
Yeah, we're not endorsing.
Okay, I'm not endorsing anybody, but I bought them from Pam's Pets. They did have to order them. Only get 2. Only get 2. I ordered 2 and they gave me 3, and
How many do you have now?
I have to have at least a couple hundred.
Oh my God.
But they're so cute to look at, you
When we
know?
get a pond, we can come to you again.
Actually, yeah.
Dawn's backyard.
Yeah. Just bring your own net.
So how big are these fish? I don't. not
The
familiar.
Gambusia fish are between 1 and 3 inches. That's it. 1 and 3 inches. All right, the Gambusia is the one on the bottom right. They kind of look like a guppy. They're in the guppy family, but all your carps will eat mosquitoes, but the Gambusia will eat more than those fish. They are a good fish to have to eat mosquitoes.
Which one of these fish do you like the best?
I like shubunkins.
Shubunkins.
When I was in Alabama, that's what I had were the shubunkins. And they were very personable. Whenever I came in my greenhouse, they all came up. Like, I knew they only wanted to eat. I felt good about it. The nitrogen cycle. This is sort of what I was talking about. When you first start your pond, you want to wait at least 4 weeks before you add any fish. Let me check my notes. When you're cycling a pond, the ammonia is going to peak first, and then the nitrite, and then the nitrate. Nitrites will kill your fish. Nitrates, not so much. But and you want to keep testing your water, because this cycle, it's not something you're going to see. You're going to have to test to make sure it was completed, and then it would be safe to start adding your fish.
How often do you test?
I test once a week, because you got your pH levels. Rain's going to affect your pH levels. The dust in the air, birds, the critters that come to your pond, debris that gets in your pond. If you keep that debris in your pond, it is going to decay, and that's going to cause certain elevations to spike as well.
And if your nitrite or your ammonia was high, if it's supposed to kind of cycle itself through,
It cycles itself through.
do you retest after it's high to see if it goes back down?
Yes.
or down?
Yep. Because the bacteria needs to grow, and once that water gets in your pond, your bacteria starts to grow. You can also add beneficial bacteria to speed the process. Excuse me. And one,
In fish tanks, you're supposed to buy like these fish that you don't really care about, just cycle it out. We don't do this.
I personally don't do that because I think that's cruel.
What was the
Because they
question?
ultimately die.
Throwaway fish.
Throwaway fish, you put them in the pond so that it speeds up the cycle, because the fish waste,
Columbus.
yes. I mean, people have done it.
We call our starter fish Columbus every time we start a new pond. But Columbus the Explorer. No, the goal is not. So you can buy. There's a product most pond places call it scum remover or sludge remover. It's really beneficial bacteria. So we preload the pond with bacteria. So we're actually ahead of the nitrogen cycle. And then, in theory, as we put in the fish, we make sure that, usually for us, it's the water conditioning, because depending on the size of the pond, and its exposure to sunlight matters a lot as to how fast it bakes out chlorine. So we'll try to
Y'all hear,
condition the
because he's
water.
like a mic rebel.
Sorry. So for us, if your pond isn't a rectangle, it's often very hard to calculate the exact volume of water that's inside of it. So figuring out the ratio of chemicals you need to add to it when you're following the instructions gets difficult. So we'll approximate, and then we'll add the chemicals till we think we've got it right, and then we'll add in the first fish. I don't move fish from pond to pond. Generally speaking, you kind of want to have a quarantine process for your fish. Even if you decide ultimately you're going to move them, you have to remember that there's an ecosystem in each pond that's slightly different from the other one. And if there's something unpleasant in the pond, you may move it to the next pond by moving the fish, which is why if you don't want your fish anymore, you call Ken. You don't take them to Kirby and dump them in, because you can cause massive ecological problems with the water that's inside Kirby. But you shouldn't have to have throwaway fish. You should be able to keep your fish going. I usually start with just one on a brand new pond, just in case I've messed up my calculations.
And call Columbus.
That's right. I'm calling Columbus because he's the explorer.
Yes?
What do you use for string algae?
I have not had a problem with string algae at all. You would have to Google that. I've never had it, not even in algae.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. If you,
See?
Oh,
For
yeah.
some reason right there.
If you have a good cycle going in your fish tank, you rarely have fish pond, water garden. Well, fish tanks too. You rarely have to clean them. Once a week, 25% water change, just to change out the water. It helps with dissolved solids and things like that. Don't over clean the pond. The balanced pond will clean itself.
Right, which is beneficial bacteria.
Yeah, beneficial bacteria.
So yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Hey, Em, scoot out.
Yeah, no endorsement, but you can buy beneficial bacteria will help with the string algae, helps get ahead of the cycle. Usually you get algae because you've developed too much nitrate, and your bacteria in your pond can't process it fast enough, and so then the algae just consumes it and makes it grow crazy. So adding beneficial bacteria will help. There is algicide, which works by changing the pH in your pond. It's basically acetic acid. So it raises the pH, because algae actually is pretty particular about the pH in which it forms. Be real careful, because too much algicide will harm fish and harm aquatic plants in general. But if your plants are established and your fish are healthy, you can use algicide. Beneficial bacteria. Algicide is sort of a short-term treatment. It just stops the algae from reproducing. So if it's gotten ahead of you, you can add some algicide to sort of try to clean as much of it out by hand as you can, and then try to add the beneficial bacteria, which in the long term will help steal the food from the algae, which is really the ultimate long-term goal.
Any more questions on that? You good?
I am good. The other thing is if you have a backyard pond or one that's out, whenever you add chemicals, you need to make sure you read the label real well. Different chemicals, even if they all are labeled for the same thing, some are safe for fish, some are not. Some are not safe for birds and wildlife in general. So you need to be aware of what you're using in your pond for what, and what are the odds are that you could contaminate the ecosystem around you.
Snails are something that may come in on the plants that you buy. Snails will eat the algae as well. So if you are using an algae product, make sure it says on there also that it does not kill snails. If you want to keep your snails. I like my snails, so I keep my snails.
Have you had some naturally?
They came in with my plants.
Really?
Yep. And I have, they're cute. This is my pond right here. I put this pond in, it was given to me. I put it in April. I have not been able to clean it or anything because I had surgery the month after, and I'm still not able to do anything. So it's functioning on its own. I haven't had any dead fish. I have wildlife that comes into the pond. I'll sit out there and just watch the little fishes. And this right here, I thought I had a squirrel living under my pond. So I got out there with the hose and I was hosing that thing like it was my job. And then these guys came out and they're all going like, what are you doing? What are you doing? There were 6. I didn't know toads or frogs, I don't know exactly know what they are yet, but I didn't know they lived together. But it was the cutest thing, and I was a happy mama.
Will they eat your mosquito fish?
No. Well, I don't know.
You have
I
enough to
don't know,
share.
because I know they get in the pond. And
And
if
how
they
are
do,
you-
that's okay.
And how are you running your waterfall?
I run on solar. I do not have electric out here.
The top button.
The top button. So here's my panel right here for my fountain, which the pump is up in here. And then this panel right here, I have 2 bubblers in there to help with the oxygen, to keep the water flowing. I haven't even done a water change yet. The testing is the only thing I've done so far. But once I get strong again, they're all in trouble.
And that solar power, how much water can that?
Oh gosh, I didn't get the specs on that one.
Okay. But
I
that
know
tank
I'm
was-
cycling enough for the volume of my water.
And what was yours right now?
I guess it's 125. My friend didn't know where she got it from, and she didn't know how many gallons it was, and I tried looking at Lowe's to see anything that looked the same, and it didn't, so I'm guessing 125. But I love my little prawns. All right, now, these are Ken's ponds. Ken, take it away.
So I should be clear, we'll get to mine. Mine's gonna be the last probably. These are Danielle's ponds. This is an example of us using, these are just water troughs from Tractor Supply. We put them out there. They have a very small bubbler that's run by,
The top button.
this is the laser? Okay.
Yeah.
So these are just water troughs that came from Tractor Supply. I have an age-old battle with Danielle over plants in the garden, in the water garden. So my fish are bullies, and they end up tearing apart the plants. So she loves water lilies, so I try to build her water lilies that are separate from my fish pond. So that's what this was. It has a very small pump that just circulates the water. I want to say they're probably 100 gallons. They're not very big. And we have 2 of them on either side of that sidewalk. And other than digging the hole, getting the water set, because it's just water lilies, we didn't really have to wait for the water to condition. Now we do have to worry about algae, because in West Texas everything blows in with the dirt, right? So stuff is getting into our pond all the time that we didn't put there. Particularly the biggest one is fertilizer. Somebody, a neighbor puts down pelletized fertilizer, it blows in, and it ends up in the pond, and that's like crap to algae. So it'll grow out of control. So we do mostly manually clean it out. We do treat it with some algicide and try to condition it, but since we don't have fish, we don't really have a full cycle.
I can give you some gambusia fish.
We might take them. This is the pond and the waterfall that almost ended our marriage. This was a pre-gas liner. We sort of around the corner from here is where we have coffee every morning. So I love the sound of running water. So we wanted a babbling brook without being able to have a brook. So we used cinder blocks initially. We decided to go with the pre-built liner. We used cinder blocks initially to build the frame for the waterfall. So it's underneath, it's a bunch of cinder blocks. And there's in order to run the hose for the drainage system, it's hard to see, but it actually comes back up under the liner here and comes out. So the waterfall is lined with a plastic liner underneath, and then we built the rock frame up around it to give it a walls on the side to keep the water channeled. And then underneath here is the flat from the waterfall coming down. If you were to lift that up, I just put a piece of 2-inch PVC, and that's how I run my hose lines back up into the waterfall. You can spend an enormous amount of time trying to get the water to flow down the waterfall. Just perfect. Which may require taking the waterfall apart quite a bit. So before you rock it all in and decide that's how it's going to be, run some water through it and make sure it's flowing down the way you want it or the way somebody wants it. And then, so we lined the bottom with sand just so we didn't have any rocks poking in. And this was a mistake that I made, is that I started filling all this in with sand and then trying to water the sand in, which basically just amounted to putting water under my pond, which just makes the liner rise up. So until the pond is full and it has, 500 pounds of water weight sitting in it, don't try to water it in because you'll just float your liner right up. And then you've got to wait for the water to drain out. In this one, we put a little planter box in the top there, which she puts sweet potato lines, which every year work their way into the waterfall. By now, they're flowing down. It's beautiful, but they're flowing down the side, and they get into the top of the waterfall, and they start drinking the water straight out of it. So we constantly have to keep this pond with water in it. If your pond gets too low, particularly with the pre-filled liner, it will float. But even with the plastic liner, it'll float just from rain. So you want to make sure you keep your ponds relatively full. These are hardy water lilies, so we're able to keep them from year to year. Usually you can cut them down and basically sink them to the deepest part of the pond, but if you can't, then you can look at putting them in a container, moving them to a garage. You basically just want to keep them out of the freezing water. This was our first pond.
His pond.
My pond.
No plants.
This is no plants. She can put plants around the outside. That was the deal. I like fish. I have a scuba diver, and so we built this pond so I could sit out and stare at my fish. And then I got really creative, and I actually have a webcam that points down from the top, so when I'm working and I'm sad, I can look at them and make me feel better. It also has a waterfall that comes in the back here, and then we have a high-rise elevator in the middle there. The only downside with this is that I used a very heavy rubber liner that I bought specific because this thing is substantial in its weight, and I never wanted to build it again. So I wanted to make sure it was something that would last forever. I bought it as a giant sheet, and if you ever get the chance to see me wrap a present, you know I'm not really good at folding stuff when it goes around corners. And so later I found a company that actually will make an L shaped rubber liner, which I would have invested in had I known that such a thing existed. But it still works great. It's awesome. Our fish are very happy.
Insulated. Did you mention that?
Yeah. So for me, I built the wood frame. Underneath the siding that I have is just 4x4s stacked up, bolted together. So it's a giant 4x4 womanized lumber. On the bottom, I took that styrofoam insulation that they make, that they sell at Home Depot or Lowe's, and I lined the floor of that with that, and then I also lined the walls so that my pond, the goal was to keep it from freezing. Now, I've had above ground ponds with koi freeze completely solid in the winter. 2 inches of ice, easy on top of it. The fish are fine. Mosquito fish don't make it.
Now, I read that they can go from freezing to 100 degrees. They have that range.
If they end up in the ice for too long, they will not make it.
Oh, in the ice.
Yeah, the
That's
problem is
huge.
mosquito fish sit on top.
Okay.
They tend not to, the koi are smart enough to go to the bottom. The other
So I
fish
have
not so
dumb
smart.
fish, is that what you're saying?
The koi will be fine.
Yeah, they'll
They'll go down. This pond generally doesn't freeze. When we had the big snowmageddon 2 years ago or whatever, I did get a layer of ice on top of it. It was fine. All in a few days. If you have a pond and the top of it freezes, you need to make sure your train pumps off. Because you'll end up putting the water on top of the ice, and then it'll freeze back into your waterfall and kill your pumps. So just unplug them, turn them off. When the temperature gets below 40 degrees, your fish are dormant. You never feed your fish if you choose to feed your fish. I don't have any plants, so I have to feed my fish. Some feed them too often. But
They're so cute.
Once the temperature goes, the water temperature gets below 55, do not feed your fish. They don't need to eat, they shouldn't eat. Fish don't have a very complex digestive system, it's basically a tube. They essentially start to hibernate, and the food will stop midway and just sit there for 6 months until the weather warms up, or 3 months until the weather warms up. Not good for the fish.
Sit
So,
inside them or where?
yeah, it just sits inside them and rots in their stomach. So do not feed your fish once the weather gets cold. They make a winter food, pond food for like koi, but it's still meant to only be given between like 68 and 78, like that water range. And it's just easier to digest, but
And that's water temperature?
that's the water temperature, not the outside temperature. The water heats up and cools down a lot slower than the change outside.
Thank you, Jen.
Wow, I don't need that.
I got that's right.
I have my own.
Chill out.
Yes,
How
can,
tall did you build that?
It's 32 inches. No, it's 32 inches, but I don't fill it to the top, so it's probably about 28 inches of water.
these resources here are the ones that I go to. They're my go-to resources. Like I said, I am not an expert. I just do what I like, and if it's pretty, I'm doing it. And if I have a problem, I find out how to fix my problem. I try to fix it as natural as possible, keeping in mind our ponds, our backyard water gardens, they're a closed system, so we have to use these chemicals to keep everything thriving. In the natural pond, the water goes out, takes the fish waste with it, and new water comes in, so that's why we do the water changes as well. And
Did you want to mention about the Lady Bird Johnson with plants? Is that the wildflower.org?
oh, the one on the bottom, the wildflower.org, that's a Lady Bird Johnson. They have a nice site. It's in special something or other. I can't remember. Mine's a terrible thing to waste. What else was it on that one? I don't remember.
It was just a good source.
It is, all of them are good sources. Some sell products. If you have a problem, you could type it in there and they'll tell you what you need to do. It's just it's all great. Like I said, I'm no expert. I have to go back to these all the time. So with that being said, any questions that y'all may have?
When you're putting water in, do you use city water or are you getting another source?
Carbon filter. Our city, I have Potosi water and it's full of all kinds of stuff. I don't even drink it, so I don't want my fish in it. So I put this on the end of my hose and fill it up with that. Even when I do my 25% water changes, I would be using this as well. It takes out chlorine and chloramines and all those other big words I can't say. Yes?
We use city water to make our water changes, and we use dechlor.
Yes, there is products to
That's
dechlorinate.
how we've done ours.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yes?
What is that thing you have in your hand?
This is a filter. I got it off Amazon. People put them on their RVs before they drink their water, and it takes out a lot of nasty stuff you don't want.
It just hooks up to the water hose.
This lasts about 6 months, depending on how often you use it.
How many gallons?
Total, $13.50.
I just wonder if you could water your yard with it.
Yes, some people have. I don't. I don't want to waste my product.
How much is it?
I can't remember. I got it on Amazon.
And it just hooks up to your water hose?
Yep, you just screw it on the end of your water hose and
My daughter uses that for misters, you know.
Oh, for the hummingbirds?
She puts it for misters so they don't pass the time. What's the name of it?
this is just Aquacrest. I think I just, on Amazon, I was going for the cheapest one. You can get them, Walmart has them in the RV section. Lowe's has them in their water treatment area.
So not really a pond area, you do to go.
No, it's
water
not a
treatment
pond
area.
area. They do sell some that say pond. They're gonna charge you more.
For that word.
You know, even like all, you know, your chemicals, because it says pond. Even your test kits. I get the pool test kits for my pH. But if you go and say you want a pond pH test kit, the money goes up. And I want to thank you all for bearing with me on this, my first one.
You did great.
Thank you.
Okay, and thanks to Ken. I didn't introduce him because I wasn't sure how much interaction he was, but this is Ken Connor. So